cold eyes stared straight into the camera, framed by a face covered in tattoos and scars. That was the moment Nico Jenkins became a chilling icon on social media. But few knew that behind those viral videos was the story of a brutal serial killer. Nico Jenkins claimed to be the embodiment of Apophis, the serpent god from Egyptian mythology. In less than 3 weeks after being released from prison, Jenkins took the lives of 4 complete strangers, leaving haunting questions about the thin line between crime and mental illness. Was he truly driven by sinister voices, or was it all an elaborate act to escape justice? Hello and welcome. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss any videos on the most bone-chilling cases in history. In today's video, we'll uncover the turbulent life of Nico Jenkins, from a child raised in a criminal family to a serial killer who struck fear across the nation. To fully understand this case, let's turn back to August 30th, 2013, when a 26-year-old Nico Jenkins was arrested for issuing repeated violent threats. He didn't hesitate to say he would harm anyone from his own family members to complete strangers, even businesses and organizations. A background check quickly confirmed that Jenkins was no stranger to law enforcement. In fact, he had been out of prison for only 3 weeks. Normally, people recently released face tremendous challenges reintegrating into society, often due to a lack of support systems. So when detectives began questioning him, they expected the usual excuses. Instead, what unfolded was beyond anything they had anticipated. Showing no sign of remorse, Jenkins boldly declared that he was a genuine danger to the community and would continue committing violent acts if instructed by the god Apophis. His audacity left investigators both stunned and perplexed. They immediately asked, "Who is Apophis?" With a cold stare and unnerving calm, Jenkins explained that Apophis was a serpent god from Egyptian mythology. He insisted that his violent acts were not sudden impulses, but divine orders from Egyptian gods, especially Apophis. According to his initial testimony, it was this god who ordered him to commit the 4 gruesome murders. Faced with such bizarre claims, tension in the interrogation room rose. Detectives demanded that Jenkins recount the entire story in detail. Jenkins looked around the room and delivered a chilling warning. "You'd better prepare yourselves, this will be a very long night." And just as he predicted, the interrogation lasted over 8 hours, filled with disturbing and haunting confessions. Nico Jenkins was born on September 16, 1986, in the state of Colorado, USA. His childhood was a dark series of days, steeped in violence and toxic family influence. The Jenkins family was notorious in the area for its long criminal history. Police records show that at least 38 of Jenkins' relatives had been involved in serious crimes. This suggested that the seeds of criminality had been sown in him from the very beginning. From his earliest childhood, Nico Jenkins was surrounded by and exposed to criminal behavior almost every single day. Instead of warm, loving family gatherings, his relatives often met to discuss and plan robberies, thefts, and various other illegal activities. This violent, crime-ridden environment became deeply ingrained in young Nico's mind, helping to shape a twisted and distorted personality. It's unclear when Jenkins committed his first crime, but one notable incident occurred when he was only 7 years old. He brought a handgun to school. At first, his classmates, in their innocence, thought it was just a toy and were curious about it. Luckily, one student realized the danger and immediately reported it to a teacher. That quick action likely prevented a potential tragedy. The school immediately confiscated the weapon and contacted Jenkins's parents. However, their indifferent reaction showed that his family was not a reliable source of support. When psychologists and social workers spoke to Nico, he gave a puzzling explanation. A mysterious voice had told him to bring the gun to school. At the time, this statement wasn't taken seriously, as children of that age often have imaginary friends. But no one could have imagined that Nico's imaginary friend would conceal a much darker and more terrifying truth than they could ever suspect. Entering adolescence, Nico Jenkins became increasingly defiant and difficult to control. While he no longer brought guns to school, he frequently got into fights, leading to repeated stints in juvenile detention. Before turning 13, Nico already had an extensive record with local authorities. He even boasted about having a supernatural force protecting him from punishment. But Jenkins's luck didn't last forever. At age 15, he asked a woman for a ride. When she refused, Jenkins pulled a gun, stole her car, and fled. Although this wasn't his first robbery, police quickly apprehended him this time. After his trial, Nico Jenkins was sentenced to 18 years in prison just after turning 16. Prosecutors emphasized that Jenkins had a severe violent tendency, no intention of rehabilitating, and needed to be removed from society. While serving his sentence, Jenkins showed no remorse. He continued talking about the mysterious voices that haunted him, but most people ignored these claims, except for Chalanda, a fellow inmate who later became his wife. Chalanda was the only one who listened and shared in Jenkins's bizarre thoughts. However, their short-lived marriage soon ended. When she learned that Nico Jenkins was about to be released after serving only half his sentence, Chalanda publicly warned that it was a grave mistake. She believed Jenkins suffered from a serious, untreated mental disorder. Still, many dismissed Chalanda's warnings, convinced that more than a decade in prison had surely changed him. On July 30th, 2013, Nico Jenkins was officially released. Chalanda could only shake her head in dismay, sensing that something terrible was about to happen, and her intuition proved to be correct. At around 5 a.m. on August 11, 2013, a police officer on patrol spotted a white Ford pickup truck parked suspiciously near a public swimming pool. At first, he assumed the occupants had simply fallen asleep after a night of partying, but after knocking on the window several times without any response, he began to feel uneasy. Looking more closely inside, the officer was horrified to find two men dead, both shot in the head with the same type of firearm. Police quickly identified the victims and discovered that several of their valuable personal belongings had been stolen. More than a week later, on the morning of August 19th, a local man returned home after a night shift at a convenience store and discovered the body of Curtis Bradford, a man with a criminal record who had just been released from prison. The body was lying face down with 2 gunshot wounds in the back. All signs pointed to a gang-related execution, and authorities quickly concluded the case in that direction. However, the string of mysterious events did not end there. Just 2 days later, in the early morning of August 21st, Andrea Kruger, a restaurant server, was murdered after finishing her shift. Around 2 a.m., as Kruger was driving home, gunfire erupted. At about 2:15 a.m., police received a call and rushed to the scene. Kruger's body was found on the road with multiple gunshot wounds. Hours later, her pickup truck was discovered in an alley nearly 20 kilometers away, burned in a failed attempt to destroy evidence. At the time, there was not enough evidence to connect the 4 murders, and no one suspected they were committed by the same person. The truth only came to light when Nico Jenkins entered the interrogation room and coldly recounted in detail his gruesome killing spree, sending chills down the investigators' spines. Jenkins admitted to committing all 4 murders before suddenly bursting into tears. He claimed to suffer from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Even more disturbingly, he said the strange voices still haunted him just as they had when he was a child. Although Jenkins spoke clearly, investigators remained cautious and did not fully trust his story. He was quickly arrested, and less than a month after his release, he was back behind bars. But Jenkins did not stay quiet. On November 3, 2013, he filed a lawsuit in federal court accusing the state of Nebraska of acting irresponsibly by releasing him despite prior warnings about his unstable mental state and high risk of reoffending. Jenkins claimed he had never requested to be released but was forced out of prison by the state. On that basis, he demanded $24.5 million in compensation. In his complaint, Jenkins issued a chilling threat proclaiming himself the protector of the serpent god, Apophis' kingdom, and ready to use violence to defend it. The reappearance of Apophis' name further fueled questions about Jenkins' mental state. In response, the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation. However, the evaluation results were surprising. Experts concluded that Jenkins did not suffer from a mental illness, but instead had antisocial personality disorder. He had been faking psychiatric symptoms to hide his true dangerous nature. Based on this finding, the court ruled that Jenkins was competent to stand trial, paving the way for his prosecution. Jenkins chose to represent himself with the support of an attorney. Throughout the trial, he displayed bizarre behavior, yelling, laughing for no reason, and muttering nonsense in stark contrast to the solid evidence the prosecutors presented about his murders. The investigation later revealed that Jenkins' mother had provided false information and even purchased ammunition for him. However, she was not prosecuted for buying the gasoline that Jenkins used to destroy evidence, as the court determined she did not know the true purpose for which it would be used. As the investigation widened, the disturbing truth about the role of Jenkins's family members continued to emerge. It turned out that Nico's sisters had acted as bait, luring two men in a white pickup truck to a remote location with the promise of an intimate encounter. The moment the victims arrived, Nico mercilessly took their lives. It didn't stop there. One of his sisters even played a role in the murder of Curtis Bradford. What made this especially chilling was that Curtis had once been a close prison friend of Nico's. In fact, just days before his murder, Curtis had posted photos on social media showing his friendship with the very man who would take his life. Investigators also discovered another individual linked to the killing of Andrea Kruger, Nico's own uncle, who had helped Jenkins steal the victim's car. However, because he did not directly participate in Andrea's murder, the uncle received a significantly lighter sentence and was even released in 2020. Naturally, Nico Jenkins's fate was entirely different, but we will get to that later. One striking detail is that despite nearly his entire family being involved in this chain of crimes, it was not Nico who exposed them. Instead, one of his sisters, seeking a lighter sentence, confessed the entire truth to the police. Nico, on the other hand, remained silent, speaking only to repeatedly mention the mysterious name Apophis. So who exactly was Apophis, the name Nico Jenkins kept repeating, and why did it hold such sway over him? In ancient Egyptian mythology, Apophis embodied darkness and chaos. He was an immortal and immensely powerful giant serpent, forever trying to block the sun god Ra's journey, plunging the world into eternal night. Apophis used every wicked scheme to battle the sun deity and bring about the world's destruction. Though he never achieved complete victory, he could also never be permanently destroyed. The ancient Egyptians believed that evil was an essential part of existence. Good could only exist alongside evil. Thus, Apophis could only be temporarily subdued or wounded, never completely destroyed. If Apophis were ever eliminated, the sun's cycle would be broken, bringing about the end of the world. They believed Apophis's evil was essential to the balance of the universe. The crimson hue of the sky was said to be the mark of his wounds, while solar eclipses were considered the work of this malevolent deity. Nico Jenkins proclaimed himself a devotee of Apophis, displaying his worship through dense Egyptian hieroglyph tattoos across his face. He even attempted to tattoo the number 666 on his face, but because he did it in a mirror, the numbers came out reversed. Not stopping there, Jenkins used a razor blade smuggled into prison to carve a swastika into his forehead. His self-mutilation reached a disturbing peak in 2015 when he sculpted his own genitals into the shape of a snake, forcing prison staff to intervene urgently and stitch him up with 27 sutures. The origins of Jenkins' obsessive belief in Apophis remain a mystery. The sentencing hearing, originally scheduled for August 11, 2014, was postponed indefinitely to assess Jenkins' mental competency. The question was whether he was mentally fit enough to fully comprehend the consequences of the death penalty. Judge Battalion ordered that Jenkins be transferred to the Lincoln Regional Center, a psychiatric hospital, but due to security concerns, hospital officials refused. As a result, doctors were forced to treat him inside the Lincoln prison itself. Finally, in March 2017, Jenkins was sentenced to death by a 3-judge panel, along with an additional 450 years in prison for weapons charges. His appeal was rejected by the Supreme Court in April 2020. The case seemed to fade into obscurity until photos of Jenkins's heavily tattooed face began circulating online, reigniting public curiosity. It was then revealed with a surprising twist. A 46-year-old woman from Texas who had met Jenkins while volunteering for a prisoner advocacy group disclosed that they were planning to get married. Although she acknowledged Jenkins's ability to manipulate others, the woman claimed that he was not a cold-blooded monster, but rather a sensitive, emotional, and highly intelligent person. However, psychiatric experts maintained their stance that Jenkins was faking mental illness to avoid the death penalty. Even so, many questioned whether there was enough scientific evidence and thorough research to definitively conclude that Jenkins was fully sane and not suffering from any mental illness. The Nico Jenkins case not only shocked the public with its brutality, but also sparked fierce debates about how the prison system handles and supports inmates with mental health issues. Was Jenkins simply another victim of a justice system that fails to address such needs? Had he truly cried out for help multiple times without receiving timely assistance from those in charge? This is a complex and haunting story about Nico Jenkins. What's your opinion on this case? Was Jenkins truly insane, or was he skillfully exploiting legal loopholes to delay his final sentence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. To continue exploring the most chilling crime stories with me, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next video.